Hello, I am Yogini Sunita, and this is Meditation, Yoga, and Stuff podcast. I believe my dharma or my life's purpose is to share my understanding of meditation, yoga, and Ayurveda, holistic healing science of India. I make these amazing wisdoms accessible and adaptable for present times. So let's start.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today our guest is Shannon Crow. Shannon, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And so my name is Shannon Crow. I live in Canada. I'm about 3 hours north of Toronto. It's very wintry here there. I'm jealous of your Australian warmth of summer. And
we are boiling.
Yeah. I sort of wear two hats. So I host the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast because I know how much of a struggle it can be to leave yoga teacher training and then just kind of feel like you're out in the wilderness. So I've been podcasting for almost 6 years with that. And then on the other side of things, I have a membership called Pelvic Health Professionals. So I started to learn about pelvic health, oh gosh, a long time ago. and saw how helpful that was and how connected it was with yoga. And so Pelvic Health Professionals was born out of really having a lot of questions and wanting to talk to pelvic health experts and then bring those talks to yoga teachers and other pelvic health professionals.
Wow, amazing. I'm so happy that you're here to talk about all this. But before we start, I know that you do a lot of work on like with the connected yoga teachers. You do a lot of work helping yoga teachers to basically find their niche, find their footing in the yoga market. Basically, we can say, I hate to use that word, the market, but we are in the business of yoga. And so how yoga teachers can, because this time after pandemic and so many things have happened, we all, like a lot of, in Australia, a lot of yoga studios have basically shut down. There's a lot of happening and a lot of people are basically going back to maybe some work rather than teaching yoga. It is very heartbreaking to see that. And how can yoga teachers find their way through all this? Can you please talk a little bit about the work you do and what are your suggestions?
For sure. Well, first of all, I want to say that coming out of yoga teacher training, that was almost 20 years ago. So there wasn't a pandemic. There was no online teaching, but I did really struggle with marketing my yoga, with thinking of it as a business, which is kind of weird because I have been an entrepreneur for a really long time. Like I used to run a farmer's market. I was a farmer. I grew vegetables and sold vegetables, and I never questioned marketing, any of that. But once it came to yoga, it was a little more uncomfortable, and it still feels different, I think, because it's such a personal, spiritual practice. And so I think sometimes like you said, I hate to use the word market. What helps me in that is focusing on how can I help people? How can I share? And how can I just invite people if it feels like a good fit? So it's more so, if a friend came up to you and said, I'm so stressed out, like I can't seem to like just catch a moment to myself or like take care of myself. Yoga really has the tools to help that friend. And so it's like we're inviting people. Maybe they're not our friends. Maybe they're not our family, because sometimes we want to tell everyone and they don't want to do it. And the other thing I learned, so when I came out of yoga teacher training, I was just thinking, I'll teach to everyone. Like I'll teach to toddlers and baby and me and prenatal and vinyasa flow and restorative, and I'll manage yoga studios. And quite frankly, what I did is I taught 16 classes a week, was managing one yoga studio at least, if not two, throughout that, and just hit burnout because I also have 3 children. And so I realized very quickly this isn't sustainable. I can't drive around to all of these classes and teach, planning out all of these different styles of yoga also didn't feel good. So slowly, and it took time, slowly I would take away, like, okay, what class is not feeling like a good fit? It was probably hot vinyasa flow. It's like, whoop, I don't think I need to teach that anymore. I don't feel connected to it anymore. And there were some that were really hard to let go. Like I love teaching prenatal and baby and me yoga. Those ones were harder, but I knew the more I focused in and niched down and specialized and talked about what I was excited about, the more students I would see coming to class, the easier it was. My classes were fuller than ever. Like my classes went from like 1 student, in 16 different classes, or a few students in all of these classes, to being like 18 students showing up to this one class that I taught per week. And that it really made an impact for me as a yoga teacher. Like it felt like, wow, why didn't I learn this in yoga teacher training? Like to really specialize and find what felt like my yoga to share out in the world.
I don't think a lot of yoga teachers learn about niching at all. So can you talk about like niching, like how that can impact? Like I know that you talked about your experience, and how can we know that what is our niche? Like how can we find that out? Is that can you talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that the best way to do it is kind of approach it like a science project type of thing, or really sit with yourself and think, what do I feel most connected to? So let's say you're teaching like 4 or 5 classes in a week. We all know that feeling of like, I love to go teach this group and I love to teach this kind of yoga, and this class just isn't feeling like it's the right one. Or working with this group of people or this individual, not that it's the person, it's just the connection that you have to this. Like I'll tell you one thing that I really did not like teaching was toddler and me yoga. So it just seemed like I already had little toddlers at home, and then I was putting myself into more of like this 45 minutes of chaos, and I just thought, no, I'm not the person to do this, and someone else can be that person. So niche work is not easy. I would say the first step is to feel like, what do I want to let go of, to dig in a little bit and think, if you were to focus on one thing, usually we have a deep sense of what we're interested in, we're curious about. But sometimes we think, well, that can't be my whole business. But you'd be surprised. I was working with one yoga teacher who really got excited talking about scoliosis, because she had scoliosis and she was doing a lot of research and learning and teaching other classes as well. And it wasn't like I didn't say to her, cancel all of your other classes. I just said to her, what if you tried this on kind of like a season where you just saw, what does it feel like for about, 2 to 3 months to only talk about yoga for scoliosis on social media or in your email or on YouTube. And that was it. Like, her business has taken off. Shout out to Christine, because she does like yoga for scoliosis. She's the person that gets to be known as that expert as well. I think that's the other piece. And then the thing that holds people back is people are like, well, I like to do lots of things. I don't want to be painted into this box. I don't want to be stuck doing this one thing. But that's generally not what happens. We evolve as we go. And what do you think your niche is? I'm curious.
Good question. Good question. I have struggled with this a lot as well, because for me, yoga philosophy, I love yoga philosophy. Then also Sanskrit is something, it is a language of yoga. So I understand that quite, I love that language. And also I have done a lot of work in Ayurveda. So for me, it was very interesting. I love teaching yoga. I love teaching meditation. I love teaching Ayurveda and Sanskrit. So what to do? So I had to literally start thinking, okay, my niche, what can and I started feeling, I'm putting myself in box. These were my thought process at that time. And then I started realizing that I did the same like you, like I was teaching 18 classes, in a week and running around. And then in 2 years like that, one day I just, I bent forward and there was blood coming out of my nose.
Oh my gosh.
Because and I'm like, oh, this is not good. So I learned it hard way that my body just said no. And I had to step back and just sit down and, okay, what do I need to do? So I let go of all the classes which were not serving me, in a sense, like they were taxing my health. I let go of the classes where I had to drive too much. And what happened that the day I made that decision, I received the classes which I wanted more.
Right.
Like I received a call from that. So I had to learn, I also, I did corporate yoga at that time. So that was my niche, corporate yoga and meditation. And I continued working that. And then when pandemic happened, before pandemic, I was moving towards more teacher trainings. And now I am focusing on Ayurveda and meditation teacher training. So that's what I offer now. And I just teach one yoga class because I have these yoga teachers coming to me for many yoga students coming to me for 10, 12 years now. And so I just do it just for myself, but as well as for them. Like this is just one online class, which I do. But I had to, I struggled. It is difficult to find your niche, in a sense. A lot of experimentation happens there. And I think it is good to have, the work you do is fantastic because you have been there, you understand the struggles, and you can help people to find their niche. So that's really amazing work you do. I'm also on the Facebook group, which you have, the Connected Yoga Teacher. And the information you share is fantastic. Like it is very, very helpful for people. I really appreciate that, This niche business has really kept me, awake for some time. And I find it, and the challenge was I'm a pitta, like what we call it in Ayurveda, the personality, which is a doer personality, which is like, I can do this. And yes, there was a point I was doing, and then managing family, and then some, but it takes toll on you. So understanding niche is very important. I think it's very, very valuable. And you're doing amazing work. Would you like to share a little bit?
I was just going to say, I feel like there's kind of a myth that then you get it figured out and then that's it. I don't think that's the way it goes. I think I have thought about niching down even more. If right now I love to teach yoga for pelvic health and bring the pieces together, but I also really love to focus in on pelvic organ prolapse. So that's a whole other niche inside of pelvic health professionals. I've thought about it in my brain, and I've thought about things like, do I want to let something go? At this point, I don't. I feel like I'm in a good spot with it, but I do think that there's a myth that entrepreneurs and yoga teachers just like get to a point where they have it all figured out. And knowing people who, look like, it looks like their business is all together, and then talking to them kind of behind the scenes. No, we're all in it. We're all like trying to figure out, what should I say on social media? What should I put in that email? That's the other thing with niche work, is once you know that's your niche, you talk about it over and over again. That's a great thing, because people then really get to know. Like, people will tag me in a Facebook post and say, oh, Shannon's the one to ask about pelvic health, and you must be the same way, where that's how I connected with you. Someone told me to connect with you about yoga philosophy. Yeah. So you get known for that, but that doesn't mean that it feels like you have everything figured out.
Yeah. For me, I mean, it took a lot of time, a lot of experimentation, what works, what doesn't work. And also what I enjoy the most, like I had to sit down. Another thing I had to notice is like, some things which were taking too much of my time, but there was not enough monetary income through that as well, which was again, I had to think on so many things, because every year, beginning of the year, I sit down and kind of like take a stock, what really is working, and what really not working. And I had to let go of that. Do you do something like that? Like do you look into big ticketed item or small item and energy draining item? Like, how do we like, can you give some pointers for the niching down?
Sure. One thing that I generally do, and I have done for the last 5 years, and usually in November. So you and I are talking in January, and I have not done this, so I don't want to say I do it every year. As I usually do this reflect and plan, and it takes some time. And I didn't get to it. I'm not putting tons of pressure on myself that it has to happen by January the 1st. But I think it's super important if you can look back and think, what did work really well? What felt good? Like, it doesn't have to be what made me the most money last year. For sure, it's nice to know your numbers and your finances 100%. But like, I've gotten to the point in my life where I think, well, I want to feel like enjoy this success now. Like, I've built this for a long time. So that to me means like something that I wouldn't have done 5-10 years ago when my kids were little, and I just felt like I was pouring into them and not really taking care of myself, is now a practice that I do. Is I will go for a walk in the morning for half an hour to an hour, or sometimes even longer, by myself or with my partner. And that, to me, it kind of feels like sometimes I'll do that where everyone else is starting work or driving to work. And I think, well, I get to do this because I've built my business like this, or I can end my day at 4:00, or I can take Fridays off. I want to enjoy. That's the reason why I became self-employed, not to work on this like hamster wheel. So I do this reflect and plan. I look at how would I like to feel next year, and how can I get there? And for sure, I take stock and look at, okay, I taught this class and it did really well, but I'm doing this other thing and it's draining. And it's not making me any money. That's a part of niching down. Like, okay, when will that go off my list? That class or that thing. But sometimes things are fueling us too. Like, maybe we're not making money from them, but they fuel us. Or anyone who has a podcast knows sometimes like, if I looked at what the income from the podcast is, well, it might not be evident. Like, the podcast isn't like raking in tons of money, but it's it's making a big impact in the world, and
Yeah.
it's a great way to market what I'm doing, like the things that I am offering.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully said. I mean, I totally understand the podcast side. A lot of work, no monetary gain, but for me, it is the podcast is something I truly believe that my dharma is to share wisdom of yoga, Ayurveda, and meditation and Sanskrit, which is part of yoga. I had to mention meditation because a lot of people don't understand that it is a part of yoga.
Mm-hmm.
But it is basically yoga and Ayurveda podcast. And this podcast I started because I was severely ill 2 years ago. I had something called Ross River virus, which happens because of mosquito bite. In Australia, everywhere, everything is there to kill you. The mosquito is one of that as well. And so I was completely bedridden. I'm just coming out of it actually now. And so
Wow.
only thing I could do is I could talk, and I wanted to still continue sharing my understanding. But this is something my heart really, it's calling. Like I can't stop, and that's how I feel about like sharing this wisdom. Like I can talk hours and hours on yoga, Ayurveda. And so I started the podcast. I wasn't even thinking monetary income, and I don't think I gain anything out of that. But that's not the point. The point here was that love and of sharing wisdom of yoga and Ayurveda. And when I started doing that, I connected with amazing people like and amazing people have actually contacted me through that. Oh, we loved your, this topic today, or thank you for sharing this. And for me, these are just things I think they are normal for me to have in my life, in a sense, like, having wisdom of yoga and Ayurveda on daily basis is such an important thing for me. And I think that's everyone. I used to think that that's everyone has that, but then I realized that no, it's not true. Everyone has a different life, and they are. So I understand the niching side of it. Like I understand why it is important, because we will gain the wisdom also differently. Like we are on path of yoga, but the wisdom you will understand. For example, you really connected with pelvic floor. I may not even, like, I don't even think about it. Like, you know what I mean? So we all connect to it differently. And so it's good to learn from, like, the people who really are passionate about it. And so on that note, can you talk about pelvic floor yoga? Like, what is it? What will you explain it for us a little bit?
For sure. Now, just so you know, I could talk forever on that.
Yes.
So that's why I know I'm really excited about it. But basically what started to happen was in my own, so I mean, I had 3 babies and nobody was talking about my pelvic health to me. I took anatomy in college, same thing. I didn't really learn about the pelvic floor, which is strange. And then in any of my yoga teacher trainings, no one was talking about the pelvic floor. We'd touch on the core, maybe. We'd definitely talk about Mula Bandha. And then obviously the Western world, like messages about like engage your core, or you need a strong pelvic floor. Those messages were seeping into yoga classes. And it wasn't until I started to get to know some pelvic health PTs, and we have some amazing ones here in Canada. I know you also do in Australia. I mean, there are amazing pelvic health PTs and pelvic health experts around the world, but definitely Australia and Canada. Some come to mind right away. And once I started to learn from them, like for one example, I went to a training and it was all about the hypopressive technique. And I got in there and I'm like, this is Uddiyana Bandha. Like, that's what it is. And it's only because I took a pretty traditional yoga teacher training where I learned that, because not every yoga teacher training, sadly, has that.
Yeah,
I can put all the information in. And then just every time I would learn something new, like then I would think, wow, my yoga students are asking me questions about that. I think that was the other thing. I never saw myself going to specialize and talk about pelvic health all the time in the pelvic floor. But it was, I was teaching a class and I talked a little bit about incontinence. I was teaching women who were, mainly like 35, 40 plus in this class, and talked about incontinence, had cards for a pelvic health PT sitting beside me and said, if anyone needs one, like this is our local pelvic health PT, and just put a few points in that class. 45, like I would say 75% of the people in that class came up and took a card. Now, I don't know if they went to see the pelvic health PT, but then they had more questions. And I thought, I'm saying me as like someone who grew up in a patriarchal Western society, learned a lot of shame around the pelvis and the pelvic floor, which is strange when you think about, like, if we just think about the body, we don't have shame about our elbow or our knees usually. But we really do about the pelvis, and no one was talking about it. So that intrigues me a lot. And then there are so many misconceptions, like the pelvic floor muscles and the entire pelvis is really complex. It's not just like do some Kegels and then everything will be fine. I started to learn how connected it was with the nervous system, and that if people were having constipation or if they were leaking urine or having painful sex, then a lot of the time it was there were very complex issues going on with the pelvic floor. And not that I was diagnosing anything, because that's not my job as a yoga teacher. I was working with pelvic health PTs. Someone would go and see them, and then they would send them back to me and say, this person needs to learn how to relax and breathe, and we need to downregulate the nervous system. And I was like, great, like that's, I can't wait until, and we'd see amazing things happen. Like let's say someone had urinary incontinence. I saw many people who said, as soon as they started doing yoga on a regular basis and just being more aware of their body, going to see a pelvic health PT and learning how their body worked, and then down regulating that nervous system, a lot of people would be like, the issue's gone, and I've been dealing with it for years. So
wow, amazing.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
I get really excited about it.
Oh, yes, please do. I totally agree. I mean, we hardly talk about it. Even Mula Bandha, like, I think you learned it because you were out of yoga teacher training 20 years ago, you said, or
Yes.
many years ago. So I think that time the yoga teacher trainings were more thorough, I think, it was more about understanding the bandhas and everything. But nowadays, a lot of teacher training, it's all asana. Unfortunately, that's what it is. But they don't teach the Mula Bandha or Uddiyana Bandha or Jalandhar Bandha. The bandhas are really, really important. And the pelvic floor, as you said, that nobody talks about it. Now, I come from the Indian background, like it's the taboo. You don't go there, it's just something you don't talk about. At least not in public, and I'm glad that you're doing this because it's such a important work. There's so many issues can be there if these muscles are either loose or tight, energetically. If it is loose, then we are losing a lot of like our chi or prana energy. And if it is too tight, we are really holding a lot of energy there. And so it's not moving. So I think the breath, the awareness can really change, and you're doing amazing work. I think that's really, really, I can imagine it is going to change a lot of people's life because it just changes the whole energy of the system, isn't it? Like so much energy channels there that if they're too contracted or too loose, it is going to impact us, energetically. So understanding of yoga and then working with the science, it's really a wonderful way to do it. Really nice.
It is. I get very excited about it. And then the other piece is that I would work with some people who either don't feel comfortable doing yoga in like sort of a traditional way, or who have mobility issues, or I worked with some people who had brain injuries as well. And that's where yoga is so much more like people come in thinking, okay, I'm going to stretch and breathe and that'll be the yoga. But I love when I can bring in the 8 limbs, if someone is kind of fighting against their body. Like, let's say someone comes in with persistent pelvic pain. So maybe they have, like, they'll call it hip pain and it's something to do with the pelvis. Then they might be sending themselves like really negative messages all the time. So I love then that we can talk about ahimsa and like, let's just check in with the messages that you're giving your body. And could we today find like, I'm thankful for my body because it gets to do this. Like there are small ways to work in the yoga philosophy. Once you, it's slow, especially if someone's brand new to yoga, which that's mainly what I've worked with. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And tell me a little bit more about the connected yoga teacher, like how that came into play. Talk a little bit about like how that evolved, and I'm very curious about that.
I feel like well, there were a couple of things that happened. I mean, I was part of a yoga community that was very much like coming into an imbalance of power, I would say. Like there was some, I joke around sometimes it was like borderline cult, but there were things in there that like just didn't feel good. And then leaving that community and kind of feeling like if I leave that community, I lose a lot of my community. That's kind of where the cult piece comes in. And I don't always tell people that was sort of happening. At the same time, I know what it feels like to want to be in community with people who understand what you're going through. And I know what it feels like to just sign up for the next yoga teacher training all along the way. And so I just wanted this resource where people could, like our Facebook group, people can pop in and ask questions anytime. And the goal with that group is that it's supportive and helpful, and that we build this like professional way of talking to each other. Because sometimes Facebook, it isn't like that on Facebook, in some Facebook groups, but ours, that like you need to go in there thinking, how can I be supportive and helpful? And then with the podcast, just basically, I started wanting to answer questions that yoga teachers had. And there's an endless amount of questions that people have. And it's really, I've learned a lot from doing it. You must feel the same way when you interview people and connect with people.
Yeah.
I've tripped over my own words and like said the wrong thing over the years, like I've learned so much from doing the podcast. Like,
I remember stressing out about, is the mic is right? Is the lighting is right? Is this right? Am I using right platform? What's happening? I'm like, okay, I'm going to approach it the way I approach yoga. I'm going to make it my own. Zoom is okay.
Yes.
It doesn't, I don't have to have fancy mics or whatever it is, and it just works. I mean, it still gives me satisfaction of sharing others, and people are listening. That means something is working there. It's just the message was important than the technical side of it. So I dropped the stress of technical side, and it works out. It works out. I truly believe that sometimes our mind creates these scenarios, like I need to have this because I did a lot of research before start. I was lying in bed, I wasn't feeling well, so the mind was into shambles anyway. And then on top of that, I was creating this scenario. Oh, I have to have this, I have to have that. And then I realized that no, it's okay.
Yes, it is okay. I did the first 30 episodes of my podcast with the microphone backwards. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get the sound right. Not this microphone, but a different one. And
The other
I
one,
mean,
yeah.
I'd say if someone's thinking about starting a podcast, one, it's a lot of work. You better really love it.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
two, like don't be, and it goes for anything. Like if a yoga teacher is thinking about putting out a video or a blog post or a social media post, like just try it out and see what lands for people, and then keep doing it, because you'll get better as you go. And not everybody's going to connect with your message, and that's just the way it goes.
It's okay. Yeah. That's what a lot of yoga teachers who I come contacting, and my personal experience also is like kind of like we had to put on this hat of marketing and put on like social media expert and email writing expert, which is not for everyone. And that's where I find a lot of yoga teachers are struggling, and also online teaching. Like I know that a lot of yoga teachers didn't know how to use online platforms like Zoom and all that before pandemic, and then pandemic happened and they needed to. So it's a lot of learning. It is overwhelming. Do you have any tips for people like yoga teachers to like how to wrap the head around all this, and how to, because a lot of yoga teachers are still self-employed and they're doing it, trying to work on their own with all this, so do you have anything like, do you help them, like how does it work?
Well, we have lots of podcast episodes and some articles as well on that, like the online yoga piece, because it became such a big thing. We have a lot of podcasts that we did, and I'm more than happy to send you just a link that goes to all of our online stuff. And then basically, if anyone wants to search and see, like, is there a podcast on this? Because we've done 300 and
so many. Yeah.
Then you can just go to theconnectedyogateacher.com and search. So let's say someone's struggling with writing their emails. I like to interview people who are really good at what they do. Like Tarzan K came and talked to us about writing email. And I mean, she's one of the top email marketers in the world that I know of. And there are little tips and tricks along the way. Like, people who write emails will say 1 email, 1 job. Like if you're writing to your yoga students, write it in this conversational way, and then have one call to action, sort of, so that you're telling them about your yoga class. So what you shouldn't do if you're following this advice, and if it feels like a good fit, because I don't want to should on anyone, but is don't write about 10 things. Like don't write 10 articles in an email. Like here's a breath practice, and here's the pose, and here's the my favorite smoothie drink. Like that's many emails. So just simplify it. And you know what you said about making it your own, I think that's key. Like take anything, email, Instagram, a podcast, and really think, well, what would I like? Or what would support the people around me? Because maybe it's, maybe your email is very different than the ones that you usually get in your inbox, the email that you send out. Yeah. But there are tons of tips out there, and I think it can be overwhelming for yoga teachers. So I'd say maybe listen to a podcast with a guest expert who's doing the thing that you're struggling with. Yeah. And then try it out, implement it, try it out, and then make it your own. Because
Hmm.
No one has this blueprint of like, here's the yoga success blueprint. I mean, people say that they do, but it's changing fast.
It's changing
Think
fast.
about
Yeah.
think about what it's like to go to a website and see one of those, like, download this PDF or get this free yoga class. Like, how 5 years ago I would have just plunked my email anywhere on a website. But now I'm like,
Yeah.
do I really want to get like emails that eventually turn into selling me something?
Yeah.
So our practices as consumers has changed as well. Yeah.
Everything changes really fast, like algorithm of social media, like, one day this works and other day it's just changed and it doesn't work, and everything is like, and people are also bombarded with emails. You said it very correctly, like, people are reluctant to put their email IDs anywhere, because then there comes the flood of email,
Right.
just crazy. Do this, buy this, do this, buy this. And I truly believe that, we can do it from yogic way, yogic point of view, like,
Yes.
how will it feel if I receive that kind of like bombardment of email? Because I'll tell you my experience. One of my friend hired a market guru, and basically their email started coming like almost every day.
Wow.
And I had to block my friend, like, dear friend, from my email. And I told
You're
her,
like, I can't do it.
said, I simply can't. This is too much yoga wisdom for me. I just can't deal with it. Like, literally day and night we were receiving email, and I just had to say no, because and I don't have, like, notifications. I switched off all the notifications from emails and social media and everything, for my peace of mind. But even then, it was too much. Like, whenever I went on the social media, her face was there. Whenever I went on the on the email, there were emails. That was too much, And so, and then the algorithm changed, and then nothing. So it's again very interesting. Like, how can we still connect without feeling overwhelmed? I really loved your message, like, make it your own, make it your own voice. It's really, really important not to overwhelm others, because just put yourself in the shoes, and yes, so you have to do the marketing, you have to sell the product. But again, ahimsa, I think, is a yoga teacher, that ahimsa is very important. I will put your podcast information and your website information. Is that how people will contact you, right? The website?
Yeah. So the
Yes.
connectedyogateacher.com, you'll find all of our podcasts. And then if people want to learn more about pelvic health, they can go to pelvichealthprofessionals.com.
All right. I'll put both those websites on my show notes, so that people can find you from there. And also, can they become Facebook member, group member? Like, how can they? Okay.
If they're a yoga teacher, we try and keep it so that it's just yoga teachers. We don't. There have been people tried to like jump in and then sell us something, and we don't like that. So.
Yeah, I totally understand. Yeah.
Yoga teachers can go to the connectedyogateacher.com, and there's a join button right there, or search Facebook for the Connected Yoga Teacher group, and I can send you that direct link too.
Okay, that will be great, because I love that group. It's really very beautiful energy in the group. People are very sharing information, but it's a caring way of doing it. It is a beautiful tone to it. So I love that. And it's a beautiful way, like, everyone who pitches in is good information. It's not like, so some crazy things happen in other yoga teacher group. It's not like that. So it's good. And I really enjoy that. So thank you for creating that kind of atmosphere. It's beautiful way to connect with each other. and like-minded people, like, we are in the same boat in so many ways. So if something works for others, it's good to know that, oh, maybe I can try it, or if something doesn't work, what can I do, so that's good, good way to communicate with each other that way. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's a great group of yoga teachers from around the world. It's really fascinating. I learned so much in there. And it's so heartwarming to see someone just jump in and like help someone with a question or help them when they're just sharing like, wow, today was a tough day as a yoga teacher. Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, Shannon. I really enjoyed talking with you. It's really appreciated. And I hope that we can do this again, because I know your expertise and your talents. I think we can maybe regroup again and try and talk about a little bit more about pelvic health, and a little bit more about other topics as well, because you're very knowledgeable. And so thank you for being here. Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I love your podcast, so it's really an honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate that you're taking this time out of your day. Don't forget to subscribe. Take care. Bye for now.